Great. So, hello everyone. So we are very honored and pleased to have today online at Metropolitan Tirana University a distinguished architect and a friend. His name is Alexandre Zein. He's from Lebanon, and we are delighted to have him online, and I'll give him the opportunity to start the presentation very swiftly. I just want to introduce myself. My name is Ernesto Pani, and I'm working in the Department of Architecture and Urbanism at Metropolitan Tirana University. We are starting this cycle of online and physical lectures under the umbrella Design in the City 2, which is an addition of activities dedicated to design, art, and architecture. And we are starting this cycle with prominent Lebanese architect Alexandre Zein. So welcome everyone, and let me just shortly make an introduction of Alexandre Zein, who is an architect and winner of several international and regional awards. He's passionate about architecture, and he's dreaming that theory and reality can enter in a synthesis, and which will emphasize the role of design in human settlement, and how architecture can make a difference in human lives and the way they live and they perceive the space and the city. So Alexander, since a young age, has been preoccupied with art creation, music, and acting. He is an enthusiast of innovation, and also he has a talent, and he plays several music instruments, sings, dance, and likes art in general, and thinks that architecture is like a synthesis of arts, and it's in fact his real passion. Also, Alexander has his philosophy that to be an architect, it means let's say, to promote and show the achievements that architecture can do for every single human being. So Alexander, I tried my best to make a summary about your philosophy of work. You can make maybe a shorter introduction of your studio, and which is Zein engineering, which encompasses like several generations. Like you have like at least 2 generations that Zein engineering is working, and we are very curious to hear a bit about it, about the history of the studio, and of course also very much interested in understanding your philosophy of work and this idea of architecture for humans, architecture with a human face, architecture for humans, which is a bit missing nowadays, especially in hyper-capitalist urban movement growth, like you find it in cities in Global South or in post-communist countries, where there is this hyper-capitalist momentum, and there is like a missing of this architecture for people, which was typical maybe in the past with the modernist period, but it's missing nowadays. So I don't know, maybe you can define it a bit better, and then throughout your presentation, and we can also have a small discussion at the end. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for accepting to make a presentation for Metropolitan Tirana University. The floor is yours, so we can start. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ernest, for this lovely presentation, introduction. I'm going to share my screen first for the presentation. So just want to make sure you can see my screen right now, right? It's good.
Yes, we see it full screen right now. Thank you.
Oh, perfect. So, okay. Thank you for this lovely introduction. Today I'm going to talk about, our work for the past 10 years with Zein Engineering. So this is our office. Our studio is in Lebanon, Beirut. Of course, now we're expanding to the Gulf. But before I start talking about the cool projects that everyone liked, I would like to really explain the project that has shaped our thinking and philosophy of work, And we're sort of interested in this idea that architecture it's not about the object, it's not about the beautiful object or the beautiful facade, but rather a performative adaptation to a contextual situation. And every project has its own anecdote, its own case. Architecture needs to adapt to humans by giving people the venues to be humans according to their values and to create the future we want to inhabit. So I'm going to start with these two pictures. So these two pictures, they look similar, but they are completely different circumstances. So on the left, we have the war in Ukraine. This is a man-made disaster. And on the right, we have the earthquake that hit Turkey. This is a natural disaster. So as a matter of fact, these events are happening today. They're ongoing right now. So, and yet they're nothing but small examples of endless other crises in the world. There's always a conflict. There's always somewhere in the world, there's a natural disaster or there's a war or whatsoever. So disasters are inevitable. And also, according to the UNHCR, we have surpassed the 100 million mark of total displacement in the world. So roughly 1.3% of the global population is displaced. They're homeless and they're living in really bad conditions. So there's this sort of missing puzzle in architecture that we're not ready for the next disaster. We're never ready for the next disaster. So there's always, the focus is heading towards the beauty of the outcome and the financial power of the client and how to create a beautiful facade where everyone is interested in the high budget project at a time when the amplitude of the global neglected issue is enormous. So in that sense, it is important to acknowledge that architecture is for everyone. It's for every single human being. And I personally enjoy working on high budgeted projects that we do many. But I always consider that we have the ability as architects to create solutions and systems that will save our planet from disasters and from really hardships. So the idea was to sort of create a visionary project that started late, from 2015 when my senior project. But I wanted the project to be doable and pragmatic. So it's important to always, project visions for the future like our ancestors did in the last century, with all these great visions to be inspired from, to be inspired by visionary futuristic projects for city, as well as inspiring the future generations with new, closer to reality, visions. And my favorite one was the Heron's Walking City. It represents a kind of technological utopianism. And today's vision for walking cities are still, unreachable, but they're pretty interesting. But of course, these futuristic ideas remain futuristic. So therefore, I thought that why don't we create a visionary project that can be doable, pragmatic, and not so far from reach? So if these major disasters are forcing people to displace from A to B, why don't we create an architecture that displaces too? Doesn't need walking legs or wheels. Maybe we can think differently to create a doable project. Also, why don't we put a new vision for the future of our cities? Maybe we should change the way we build our cities because buildings failed us as architects. Architecture failed us. We failed to protect our planet. And all those amazing, beautiful buildings that we like today, signed by star architects, are the most harmful to our planet. And you see the results today, so out of control, like climate change and the rise of sea levels and pollutions everywhere. So now we're paying the price and the repercussions. So our research today is focusing on how to create settlements that can be completely disconnected from the urban infrastructure, right? Possessing their own self-sufficiency. So imagine in the future, each building is perfectly independent from the city's infrastructure. It can harvest its own energy sustainably, its own electricity, its own water, keeping the motherland safe. So as complex as it seems, decoding the whole sophistication will need to spawn from the micro before we go to the macro. So the project is based on a matrix in which you would decode the whole complexity once this matrix is understood. So its cell is made of a core and a periphery of plugins. So it's the served and the serving. So the core serves the periphery. So the cell, the core is the main shaft that contains all the services that the end user needs to create a self-sufficient dwelling. For instance, the shelters are powered using PV panels alongside a small generator for backup. And also water is collected by gravity and stored in external tanks after being filtered by cartridge seals. And then pumped back to the unit using PRP, clean and drinkable. So there's this cycle, how we can benefit from the rainwater so we can harvest water. And as for the wastewater or sewage, is constantly being recycled using external treatment plant common for each couple of units. So gray water makes its treatment cycle to become reused for home cleaning, maybe for laundry and irrigation. While the black water, we can just get rid of the traditional way to use the existing sewage. We can instead, connecting to the sewage, instead we can use a black box that can actually transform waste into energy. So we have this sort of anaerobic digester that resides to serve the whole settlement. So biodegradable waste and commercial waste is automatically turned into biogas, electricity, and heat. So basically we have the core and swirls around it 4 units. So we have a clan, and here we have 4 clans that swirls around another core. So basically this is the main matrix we're talking about. So I am from Beirut, and we all remember what happened, in the 4th of August, so 2020. So it did not only rip off the whole city, but it destroyed the whole economy and destroyed the whole society, and it created trauma among everyone. So, and the result, a total of 200,000 homes were affected by the blast, in which 3,000 were severely damaged or destroyed. And also, 300,000 people were made homeless. And some people didn't have access to the basic needs. They were living in bad conditions. And some had to sleep in the streets because they had no place to stay. So it's more like the basic needs needed for animals, they were not there, were not present for them. So this is not human. This is not acceptable according to human rights. So that's why, and after the explosion, just a small fact that the young Lebanese people and all the Lebanese people just went down the streets and started cleaning the mess and collecting the rubbles and everything. So we all felt this sense of responsibility towards our city. And for me, as an architect, it was the tipping point that made me take that decision that actually I want to execute the project. So I took that decision, and I actually gathered a team of 60 volunteers, and we called it the Squatter Settlement. And everybody was so excited, incredibly, that they wanted to contribute to Beirut to give the best and try to execute the project. So this was the map that called of all the destroyed buildings. In the red, they are the most damaged. So first we had to identify and target the 3 types of family victims. First, we had the families that had their homes completely destroyed, just like the ones in red. So they needed a new place to stay permanently. But some other families, like the one in yellow, they had their homes partially destroyed and needed a couple of months maybe to be repaired. So they needed a place to stay temporarily until they moved back to their homes after being repaired. And some other families, they were living in old wage systems. So they got ousted by their landlords, so they needed a new place to stay permanently. So first, we wanted to execute the project not so far away from the epicenter. So this was the area of our research to find the land to implement the project so they can maintain their regular lives and social functions, not being so far away from their old homes. So we had targeted and found these lands. Some of them were private, but we couldn't reach the private ones. And we were so lucky we stumbled upon a land owned by the municipality. It's right in front of the Steve Comfort building. It's actually a parking lot. It's 1,600 square meter land. So after doing the research, we were contacting the families that lost their homes. We had 16 families, they were ready to move in directly. So we sort of created the 16 houses to fit inside 1,600 square meter land. So this is a plan. So this is like a real plan of it. So we have the core in the middle, and we have the latrines, or you can call the kitchen and the bathrooms. And then we have the spaces that are, you know, changeable, and they can actually change with the scale, and we can have an open spaces, or sometimes we can have partitions. And also, as architects, they say that designing a shelter is like you design something that doesn't look nice, that looks like a cottage. So that's why we sort of proved them wrong. We sort of designed the facade in a way to make it look appealing and beautiful. So essentially, architecture is made to be assembled and dismantled in like a matter of days or two. So that is most, you know, it's very easy to build. It's very lightweighted. It doesn't require much manpower. But of course, it's just like a puzzle. You need to encode it in a way. So we're creating an encoding system. So as you can see here, we created the catwalk so you can reach the houses. And this is the skeleton of the building. We have all the structure needed to be robust by connecting all these elements together. We'll come up with a really strong structure that can withstand wind and all the nature power. So basically, this was the skeleton analyzed and designed before we start executing. And for the walls, we had to use EPS sandwich panels because they're perfect materials. They insulate perfectly. They're cheap and they're very lightweighted, lightweighted elements. And for the floor, we use flooring. And for the furniture, we use papers, reinforced paper panels. So we actually started executing the project. We had to build the first prototype. So we built it in the soul of Beirut seminar. As you can see in this picture, is so expressive that how light-weighted the walls are. So I'm going to show you a small video how we built the whole skeleton of one unit. We were able to build it in 4 hours. So 3 men were able to build this prototype in 4 hours. Only 3 to 4 men. So starting from the beams to create the walls and the sandwich panels and the flooring, and of course the happiest man was me. And I started explaining the project. So and the result, we came up with this result. Of course, it had to look some aesthetically nice, but we were just showcasing the quickness of how quick we can build this project and in a very easy way. So any 4 units can be built in 1 day. So that's why whenever any crisis or a disaster happen, this project is so phenomenal and important that in a way that people can just come back to their life. They can find a place to stay. They can find a roof where we can stay because they can build it themselves. But also there's an important phenomenon called schooling, because this project needs to be built automatically. It's auto building. So that's why there will be corps of trained builders that will train others, and then the system will spread. So that's why the phenomenon of schooling is fundamental. So it's a permanent temporality instead of a temporal permanence. So people can stay in a temporal settlement permanently. And whenever they decide they want to just take it away, they can just dismantle it in a matter of day, and they can maybe store it, or maybe they can move it somewhere else. So therefore, we don't need legs. We don't need any wheels to create a mobile city. We can just create a structure that is lightweighted, that can be assembled and dismantled in like a matter of days, and then you can move it anywhere else in the world. And it's self-sufficient. But of course, we're doing a lot of research still. That's why I call it the project of a lifetime, because I'm sure that in the future there will be many good technologies that will help, acquire this project to put it on the next level. Like for instance, we're not right now. We're still facing. We're doing a research on how to create toilets to be, self-sufficient without the need of any sewage system to be drained in a black box whatsoever. So we're still doing a research where maybe a toilet tool can be automatically can do the whole work by itself. So, but of course, this is going to need a lot of research. There's going to need some more new technologies that we're going to come up with time. But the interesting part of it is that the construction is too easy and fast, just like building it that. It does not require much manpower. That's one of the most important things. And we also made a calculation for how much they all ask about the cost, how much this project will cost. So the total budget for 4 houses for 1 clan, including the core and 4 units, was calculated to be $47,000 according to Lebanese prices. Of course, this number can vary like 5 to 10%, but this number is sort of negligible comparing to how much buying a house will cost, or how much repairing a house will cost, or how much time it will take. So I think that this number is quite low. So if you divide that by $12,000 per unit, it's very low price for a house. And but of course, it's a one-time payment for a system that will endure, and you'll be using the system for any emergency, or you can store it and you can move it around all the time. So it's a permanent temporality project. And I also call it a permanent cycle. So whenever any crisis happen, we call the project the squatter settlement, because people build their own settlement. They have to squat it and build it themselves. So they are settlement squatters. And then in the post-crisis, when the crisis is over, they have to dismantle it, so it has to shrink. So whether you store it or you can move it somewhere else, according to waiting for the new crisis or whatsoever. So of course, it's an adaptive architectural system. What's really interesting about this project, that it's not only tailored to maybe Lebanon or to one particular place. This project can be built anywhere in the world by adapting to its context, by using local materials. Like for instance, we were able to make also a test, and by building this project in Cambodia, we used bamboo canes instead of steel, and we were able to build it using their techniques, but we were using the same encoding system. But the only difference was with the local materials. Now, for a precarious population, for a population that does not know when leaving and when staying, so some people will leave, some will stay, so there will need to be some sort of a theory for the growth and for the shrinking, so we can delineate the matrix. So as you can see here, as I explained earlier, that we have a clan, that's a core that swirls around 4 houses. This is the clan, and here we have 4 clans that swirls around another house. So the part looks like the whole, which reminds us of the theory of fractals. It describes the theory of nature as a self-organizing system. This is when we explore the same pattern in different scales. So the part looks like the whole, it's a never-ending pattern. So we sort of associated the theory of fractals to be used this project. So starting from 4 units, 1 clan, it sort of stimulates to become 4 clans, and we have 4 tribes, and then we have a confederation. So it grows accordingly and grows and shrinks using the theory of fractals. So of course, it's encoded to have for each house to be in a square of rule. So this was the master plan, this was the proposal we did for the Syrian refugees in Lebanon. So this was built for the whole community. But of course, since we're building a community, it encompasses all the functions needed for a city to be alive and to actually operate normally. They're going to need health center, you're going to need commercial shops, you're going to need, for example, a place to work. So they can work in here, and they can open their own shops, and they can have a whole life, and it's all temporary. And imagine that this whole city can be dismantled in in a very short time, and it can be moved somewhere else where another crisis is happening. So this is a real mobile architecture that is pragmatic and doable, and actually it can be done once we have the budget, and once we have of course we need a huge amount of budget. So here's are some views during a day, during a night. So that's why we always talk about the donation, because we're trying to create some sort of platform where we can sort some amount of money where we can have, if we receive some donations, we can actually try to build more and more prototypes and to rescue more and more people. And for me, I consider that this project, each country around the world needs to have this project stored and ready to be used in case of any disasters. Because disasters just come abruptly, and you can never know when it's going to happen. So once it's happened, we're not ready for it. But imagine yourself, you have this project. I mean, in no time, all these people that lost their homes, they have a place to stay temporarily until they think and analyze what they're going to do next. So after talking about the essential project, we were actually able to extrapolate from this water settlement project many ideas that we actually did embed them in our project. So I'm going to start talking about the small projects, and then I'm going to go to the bigger ones. We actually designed studio sets for TV shows. The past 8 years, we've been doing really new ideas for the studio sets. So these are kind of projects that I call quick because in a very short time, you can get to design them and build them. So after working on numerous studios year after year, we sort of picked up a few things along the way. We sort of came up with the solutions for many problems that the TV stations were facing. Like, for instance, the lack of space. You don't have that much spaces, and they have a lot of studios. The inability to make changes during a show due to the heaviness and rigidity of the project and so on. So, you know, traditionally, these studio sets are designed to be rigid, fixed, and unchangeable, just tailored for one show. So we thought that instead of creating like the same conventional studios, why don't we work on modular and flexible and mobile studios that can be also transformable, the way that you can create multiple segments in one show. So it started with the news in LBCI. So the first picture in the studios was the old news. So we sort of suggested this idea to create two extensions to the main desk. And by removing the mid desk, we come up with the different studios. This is a very simple example. And then by rotating, you can come up with a completely new one. So we actually executed it. So this was the studio. This was the main set with two extensions. And by removing the mid desk, we'll come up with a completely new show. Of course, you have to change the graphics. So we were able to successfully do it. And then we started designing all the next studios in the same way to be encoded. So we were able to also successfully, for the project, studio called Al-Majhul, we were able to make a really great transformation. So this was season 1. And then we were able to easily transform it from season 1 to season 2 by just making a small modification, just still elements. And of course, we had to change the table. So we sort of designed the table to be like fighting gravity in a way it can just stand on 2 points. So we were able to make changes using the same materials. So, but of course, in our designs, studies have shown that the sight of curvilinear shapes, they activate parts in the brain that determines beauty as they echoes nature. So we sort of responded positively to these forms in the studios, and we designed multiple shows using the same strategy, like using curvilinear lines, and they're all transformable and changeable and like it. So I'd like also to mention that if you take a look at this same room, we're building all these studios in one room. So if you take a look at this screen as a reference, let's start talking about the project of the researcher. So we sort of created this sort of inverted spider, because this show is about science, and it's a competition between doctors. So in the same room, we were able to create another studio using the same screen. We dismantled it, and we took the same strips and we transformed them, and we created a new studio called Sual Muhrij. And as you can see, we have the sort of repetitive metallic strips, and of course we have these slices to create a sort of futurism. Designed the table in a way that looks like a flying insect that will host two persons giving interviews, and so on. Of course, all these elements we designed for another show. So this is the area of the news. We also designed in the same room for the news. We designed a show called 50/50. All these elements are on wheels. They can easily be maneuvered and can change their positions. And for another TV shows, after designing for LBC, they sort of also called me, and I was sort of commissioned to design all their studios using the same technique, because they only had this small room. So we sort of created all the elements to be transformable and changed them. So we encoded the system in the same way, the same technique used for the squatter settlement, used for the studios. So it can be changed and transformed. So as you can see, you can change the studios according to the show's needs, according to what segments we need. We were able to make the changes. So these are small examples of how we can code the system. So every element is on wheel, and every element is encoded like a puzzle in a way that it can change and transform. So we were able to embed them. So we created 9 shows in one room. So this is the main screen used. We were able to just cover it with the black blanket. And we created 2 screens that we can move their places. So we created another show using the same screen, same element, the third show, and multiple shows were transformed using the same elements. And on the other side, also we create multiple shows using the same techniques. We have the same table. We make some small changes. We come up with completely other shows. And we also design stages. So this is one of the interesting project we worked on. So this was a huge stage for a project called Arabinë Saudite. So as our ancestors in art were the base behind the new era, they inherited their DNA to the next generation. So the idea was to sort of reproduce this DNA structure as the main element. So we have this sort of stage inside of the stage, creating a perspective illusion with a sort of futuristic aspect that reflects the period of our time. So, and also learning from the squatter settlement. It's important to think about the environment whenever you want to design a building. So now we're going to talk about some buildings. Because architecture is seriously killing us. So we need to harvest energy more than it needs to consume. And with this whole worldwide consensus talking about climate change, the fact that buildings do contribute roughly 40% of the total carbon emission. But the good news is that we have the power to mitigate carbon emissions in our designs, even if it's a typical residential building. So what if architecture can breathe? What if it can be alive? So we were sort of assigned to design a residential building in the heart of Sayeh. This is a village that encountered like rapid growth in terms of its density. So, so this is the land, this is the area. Of course, in Lebanon, we have really strict regulations for building regulations. So we are obliged, for example, for instance, to create pitched roof. And of course, we have to follow the regulations so it can be built. So we sort of created two main courtyards to make sure all the apartments will receive enough daylight. And we were able to fit 3 apartments in this rectangular land. And of course, use the same techniques as the ones in the settlement. So we sort of benefited from the rules and regulations to harvest energy. For instance, we actually benefited from the pitched roof, so it can become the canopy for solar panels. So there we like the cladding of the solar panels. They are actually they're actually the bricks used for the pitched roof used as a solar panel, and you were also able to benefit from the rainwater. So it's collected from gravity, and then after being filtered by cottage seals, it was filtered and pumped back to all the apartments. So we're benefiting from the rainwater, and same technique used in the squatter settlement for the rainwater can be also transformed and filtered to be reused for mopping, flushing, laundry, and gardening. So we had this sort of treatment system embedded in the basements. And so this was the building, and we sort of created these metallic strips to house growing plants. So essentially, buildings emit carbon in 2 ways: the emission from the embodied materials to build them, or the emissions from the fuel needed to operate the building. So to reduce the embodied carbon, we need to use adaptable and durable materials with the lowest footprint possible. So instead of using steel rebar, we sort of replace it with basalt rebar. But first we wanted to actually use timber, but it was completely rejected. So we had to use concrete. But instead of using the steel rebar that are really not so well for the environment, we replaced them with basalt. Basalt is a pretty interesting material. So for a concrete reinforcement, it weighs 4 times less than steel rebar. Its tensile strength is 3 times higher, and of course, it's environmentally friendly. Whereas we're still using concrete, which is not really such an ideal material for sustainable building. So in order to neutralize...
Sorry, can I ask something? Why could timber not be used?
Because we don't have it as a resource. We have to always, you have to always buy it from outside the country, and they're putting so much regulations in the urbanism. So they were like, no, you have to use concrete. So we were able to use timber, which is a very sustainable material, but we had to use concrete. But we did something really interesting, that we replaced the steel rebars with basalt rebar. It's a very environmentally friendly material. But as we're using concrete and we are consuming energy, in order to neutralize the exceeded carbon emitted by the concrete, we sort of grew a plant called microalgae. So the microalgae actually absorbs carbon, and it needs carbon to nurture and to grow. So it's a win-win situation. So sort of embedded the microalgae to be part of the project. Anyway, the result, we have a project that is breathing, that is alive, because each carbon that is coming out of the building is being absorbed by these plants. So we're trying to neutralize the carbon that we had to actually embed in a, deliberately for this project. So actually, we call the project the white dot, since it's going to be the cleanest building in Saleh. So now the project is under construction, and we did these are the renderings. Now it's almost completed. Now we're in the finishing phase, and we also designed this cantilevered pool that is flying above the whole building, overlooking the amazing views of Beirut and the sea. So we did use basalt rebar, and that's the pool executed. And it was a cantilevered. It was a huge pool cantilevered above the skies. So that's the building, right? It's in its finishing phase right now. And of course, it's expected to be this year completed. Of course, we kept all the trees that were actually in the site. We kept them to be part of the project as well. So another project we had in Beirut, in a dense bustling district called Shën Michel. So this area faced 25 years of war. And the result, we have a lot of devastated and unfinished structures that looks like this. So the developers attempted to replace these unfinished structures by commercial residential blocks so ugly that look like this. And the area possesses nearly 2% of greenery. There's no public space. So this was the land. And usually in Lebanon, the private projects remain too private. So we sort of convinced the client to create some sort of public attraction by creating some retails and offices in the first levels. And so we can invite the public to be part of the project, and that's essential. So instead of using the maximum footprint, like all the investors do, to have as much apartments as possible, we sort of took the footprint to the minimum and going higher. And by going higher, you can enjoy the great views of Beirut and the Mediterranean Sea. And of course, we can have some public space. And to retrospect all the unfinished structure, we sort of brought all the structural elements to the extremity to be part of the project. And then to neutralize the exceeded exploitation, we sort of subtracted parts of the nude slabs, creating some sort of motion across the facade and double levered for greenery. And then on the top, we sort of pressed up the elements so we can give it a strong character that would remind us of the resilience of Shën Michel. So this simple rational building has greenery that surpasses the 2% of the area. So here you can see this is the project, and of course we used ACP panels so we can give it a strong character that would remind us of the period of our time. And of course we sort of recessed all the glazing elements in a way that during summer we can create the perfect shades will be created, and during winter the sun will perfectly penetrate the interiors of the spaces. So here you can see the connections from the inside out to the amazing views of Beirut and the tower. But at the same time, it's perfectly sustainable. From Beirut to Cameroon, now we were commissioned to design a convention center in an area called Pjesa in Cameroon. So the site is sort of surrounded by volcanic mountains, actually, like the eastern slopes of Mount Cameroon. And it's a more or less educational area with omnipresence of youth and universities around. But in fact, political tensions have actually turned into violent clashes and led to civil war that ended like 3 years ago in 2020. Therefore, not only does the area surround itself by volcanic natural volcano, but also social eruptions revolting for a change for a better grew up. So in that sense, the government decided to foster cultural facilities that will lead to the future of Goa into a more intellectual than hostile. So the project is designed to catalyze its surrounding, stimulating a willingness of growth and development, more like a contagious virus with positive side effects that will grow as a community. So here you can see the people, like we want pens, not guns. Here you can see the social volcanoes located, and this is the Mount Cameroon. This is where we have the volcanoes. So sort of got inspired from that to create these three important points: the natural volcano, the social volcano, and we have the project. So, so as for the architectural volume and attitude, we wanted the project that was a robust as its surrounding and has a standout attitude as a landmark. You know, so the Metropolitan, the design starts with the extrusion of a rectangle within the setbacks, and after that, we sort of divided the rectangle into the two main functions. We have the banquet hall on the right, we have the cultural and the commercial on the left. And then in the middle, we have the main connection that will connect the two main spaces. Of course, the banquet hall needs to be bigger. And in order for us to, and being inspired from the volcanic eruption mechanism, the two rectangles sort of crack back inwards, is signaling a main entrance and creating the two main stairways that will connect the people from the ground up to the sky garden. And with this sort of angular movement continuing and unfolding, you see the pressing up of the roof edges, maximize visibility and light, and of course to create a seating stairway. And lastly, of course, we have to connect these volumes together and link them to make the project as a united element. And then we sort of simulated the volume. Here you can see it from different angles. It resembles a sort of a tectonic eruption incepting from the ground up. So it needs to resemble the area. So we make sure that the project will resemble its context in a way that it only belongs to Goa and not anywhere else. And if here you can see in the dissection that we sort of created a sort of a weaving-like effect to enhance visibility between different spaces. Therefore, all the spaces are interconnected visually, so everyone can see everyone. And of course, in architecture, it is important for the project to propose a sort of testimony for its context. So from the inception of this project, we made sure that the building will resemble its context, like Goa, and it won't be compatible anywhere else. So that's why we sort of got inspired from this picture, because this is a very well-known symbol in Cameroon. This is Mount Cameroon of the volcano. So we sort of decided to embed this mountain as a rasterized image using perforated ACP panels. So we perforate these elements to create this effect of the mountains to be embedded in the facade. Here you can see how it was embedded in the main elevations. And of course, you can see the volume, how it sort of interact positively with the community in a way that the public can sort of take the stairs up all the way to the sky garden. But unfortunately, the client actually refused to allow the public in because the area is still hostile and people will come with guns and it's pretty risky. So we're trying to maybe in the future, maybe we just create the example for the future. We keep the stairs and we keep the elements. Maybe if the society will become more intellectual, maybe they can start using it. So we kept it as a ready to use element as an architecture to be in the future use. So it's important to play with time. So architecture is a testimony of its time, that we created a project that will actually function perfectly in the future once all the hostility is over and the new generations will be part of making the change. And we also, as you can see here in the design, it looks like a separating volumes, separating elements from one another to create a sort of tectonic movement. And we realized from this area, after visiting the area, that Goa contains a lot of colorful buildings, so they use colors in their buildings, and as you can see, there's a lot of trees and greenery. So this is like the identity of Goa. So in order for us to embed this identity into the project, we sort of designed the stairs to be colorful as well, and we created trees and greenery in the main entrance of the building. And here you can see in the plans, I'll pass quickly with them. So we have the banquet hall on the right, and here we have the amphitheater and the main hall. And then by going up, we sort of created these modular conference rooms in a way that we can have a whole conference room, or we can separate them easily using walls with wheels. And then here in the area, to follow the volumes, we have this sort of tilted, slanted element. We sort of benefited from it to create this sort of a stairs, seating stairs where people can sort of sit, and we can use it as chairs as well. And you move up to the administration to reach the restaurants on the top, and the nightclub. And of course, here we have the sky garden that maybe one day in the future will be used. Okay, so ultimately this project is much more than building. Is both a social statement and a political response, and also an announcement for a new community that calls for change and progress. And also we sort of won the competition to design a residential complex in Riyadh, KSA, for the rental group. So the project is located in a high-end neighborhood in King Abdullah Street. So this is the land. So, and a challenge to create a residential project that maximizes the use of outdoor spaces in an area that avoids sun exposure. The design is flexibly in adaptive response to its context. So the assignment was to create 3 types of apartments. And of course, the third floor must be 50% of the second, and the roof 50% of the third. So we had a lot of regulations and rules that we had to follow. So first, we had to identify the DNA of the project first. So inspiring from Riyadh city's pixelations, we sort of stimulated a skin that serves as a protection from the intense sun rays, especially with the units oriented to the south, and to foster privacies among families. Also inspiring from the Riyadh's desert textures, we sort of stimulated the main skin shield that will protect the overall building. So the iteration of apartments acquires the same essential ingredient to create a superior living experience. So each unit acts as an organic cell that can change its morphology according to tenant's needs, synchronizing with real-time environments. These perforated skin shield, they actually transforms according to its location, almost like a nervous system that will link between 2 otherwise separate environments. So essentially, we had to emanate from a grid 1.2 times 1.2. Then we created sort of a looping element, and then we had to lift it up in the southern part so we could protect the overall building from the intense sun rays. And then in the middle, we created the heart of the project, the main core that will connect the 2 blocks. And then, of course, we had all the gardens to make sure all the apartments receive enough daylight. And then by mingling all these elements and apartments together, they sort of cascade up to reach 150 apartments following the regulations, and they all enjoy the great views. And each apartment has its own garden, outdoor garden. And by studying the sun path, to make sure that to create a sort of shading within the apartments in a way that each apartment with its garden, everyone can spend time outside without being in front of the sun, so without being burned by the sun. So these sort of cascading movement, they sort of cast shades within the gardens in a way that people can sort of spend time outside during the day in Riyadh. And also by studying the ventilation, we sort of created this main skin shield as a pattern that looks like the desert pattern, in the way that filters the desert's sand winds, and of course to create a perfect ventilation for the whole building. And of course, you can see the dissection of the project. We sort of designed the circulation in a very dynamic way. So instead of creating these long corridors, we sort of created dynamic corridors that would change between one apartment and another. So this was the building during the day and at night. And of course, you can see here the looping element is giving this sort of dynamism and how it's protecting the apartments. It's like a living organism. And of course, we have the trees and gardens, and here we have the sky garden, the pool, and all the amenities needed for the end user to enjoy great life. So you can do everything in this project. And here you can realize how the main skin shield sort of casts shades in a texture that looks like the desert texture. So it gives a sort of dynamism to the project. So the plans, of course, in the basement, we have all the services needed. Everything that you need in the city is present in here. And of course, this is the ground floor where we have the main lobby. And then the first floor, we have the gym. And of course, up there, we have the sky garden. And by cascading up, we're reaching all the units following the regulation, reaching all the 150 apartments. So the end user has the flexibility and the liberty to open and close these panels during all times of the day. So you can have perfect transparency at night if you don't have the sun. And to protect yourself from the sun, you sort of close these panels and you have this sort of dynamic cast a play of light inside of the space. So these are the sections and elevations. From KSA to Iraq, we had a project in Erbil. We were invited to design a shopping mall at a block that overlooks the SA Park. So the idea was to sort of create the mall as the bridge that connects the city to the park. So we created a tunnel underground that connects the building to the garden and penetrating deep into the heart of the building. Also, on both ends, we had to create two gardens, one for men and another for women. This is their tradition. And of course, we had to set back 10 meters from the road. So the design was sort of engendered using curvilinear shape and the negative spaces. So we were able to engender the volume following all these rules. So of course, we see the color, the white is sort of dominant. It has all the colors of nature. And of course, we sort of tilted all the walls of the retails to create some sort of dynamism. So we don't have like a very linear project, but it's all sort of tilted and slanted in a way or another. So, and of course, in the main entrance, we have a huge stairway that acts not only as a transitional space, but also it invites people to spend time there and sit and have a coffee and enjoy their time. And also in Dubai, we were sort of invited by Once Entertainment Management to sort of imagine a new sort of addendum to the already existing Lebanese pavilion in order to sort of identify Lebanon as a pavilion, to create some sort of identity. Since if we remove the logo, there's no identity. So how to create the identity using an already existing structure? So Lebanon and the Lebanese flag embodied by the cedar tree is not only a representation, but a manifestation of its meaning. So strength, peace, and eternity symbolized by the cedar where are and will always be the crest of this country. So not to forget the great history that gives its own identity. We have Baalbek there. So in that sense, we created and tested light-weighted elements. Excuse me. Okay. So in that sense, we created and tested these light-weighted galvanized steel tubes that can be attached. But of course, the tubes are hollowed inside, so we can reserve place for RGB lights. And of course, it's light-weighted, so you can see we were able to close them. So it looks like a tube, but it's very light-weighted. It can reach up to 2 to 3 meters. And the closer one can be 1 meter. And so 500 tubes were to be installed on the surface of the facade of the Lebanese pavilion. And then we sort of depicted the Lebanese cedar. And then by pressing in a very dynamic way, up and down, we were able to create this sort of dynamic facade that would give this sort of identity of Lebanon by the cedar. So the cedar is actually the identity of Lebanon. You can see it in the airplanes, you can see it anywhere, even in the passports. And of course, it sort of gives a sort of standout for Lebanon in a way that this project will be attracted by the visitors, and it will stand out actually. So here's a small video of Okay, so I'm going to talk about this last project. This was a small project in the middle of the Lebanese mountains, but it's a really important project because it has this perfect relationship with nature. So we sort of designed the house as a soul mediating body situated far away from societies and the bustling urban assemblies, surrounded by mountainous topography and dense vegetation, offering a way of life, in tune, with nature. So the volume of the house is sort of a perched element detaching itself subtly from the ground, orienting itself towards the infinity sky. And then this ascending movement is designated by this sort of stairway, accessible stairway, that people can just sort of use and take pictures in it. And then we sort of identified the entrance, and then we maximize the views by lifting up. So what's really interesting about this project that we were able to scrounge from nature all the materials. So we were taking the materials from nature and embedding it directly into this project. So in a way, to minimize the environmental impact of the structure as much as possible. So through energy efficiency and eco-friendly materials and in plain harmony with the surrounding, the new architecture aims to conserve the biodiversity of the area, to create a life in tune with nature, so people can just live this sort of meditating times where they can just be connected with nature using this architecture. So these are the plans. Of course, very small. We have the living room and kitchen, and we have the master bedroom upstairs. This is the interior. I would like just to mention that our jobs as architects are to respond to any assignment. So if we have a high budget project to work on, we need to do it perfectly, and also we need to be able to respond to any situation in a way that we are able to assist in. So whenever any crisis happens, we need to have this sense of responsibility. And not only say that I only build for the rich, I'm only built for rich associations. I make great projects, cool projects, but also we need to think about humanity. We need to think about the importance of humans, because of course everyone deserves a good architecture. Everyone deserves a safe and good and safe place to live and spend some time and be happy. And I always say that architecture makes people happy, and everyone deserves to be happy. That's what I consider. So I want to end with these two pictures. So this was the explosion that happened in Beirut. Actually, it killed our emotion. It killed us when it happened. But we know that architecture is too powerful that it can make an impact and be there for people in times of need and emergencies. It can be there for them, to give them hope and to make them happy. So I just want to end with the last picture to say that when the explosion happened 3 years ago, the whole city was almost destroyed. But I'm so happy to tell you now that we recovered. The city has recovered, and now it's full of life. And if you go to Manabkhaye, this is a picture taken in Manabkhaye. So if you go to Manabkhaye, the area right in parallel to the epicenter of the explosion, you'll find everyone with great spirits, everyone with great souls. It's people that actually animate the city. And then the city without people is actually dead. So the soul of the city is the people themselves animating it. So I'd just like to tell you about how amazing this population, the people of Lebanon are. These are amazing people because they all love life, and they enjoy their lives no matter what, no matter how bad and how harsh the economy is and living in hardship, and no matter how drastic the situation gets, they always have time to try and be happy. It's not always about perfection, but sometimes you just have to allow the city to have to feel the soul of the city so you can be happy. So we recovered, and we still have the best food in Lebanon. So I really advise you to come to Lebanon and enjoy the great spirit there. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alexander, for the fantastic presentation. Lots of emotions. It was really, really amazing, very insightful. It was a lot of time that I didn't enjoy a presentation like this, and I'm sure the audience that we have thinks the same. Before I make a final comment, I would like to thank you again on behalf of Metropolitan Tirana University. Also, I would like to ask if anybody from the audience has any questions. Maybe briefly, it would be nice if someone could say something. Maybe we have an international audience. Also, we have our Erasmus students abroad, like Alessia is in. Yes. Okay. All right. So Maren has a question, and maybe Alessia, Maren, you can write it down if you can. Okay, so Maren is a German student who is actually in Latvia, where our student Alessia is studying, and she's asking, let me read it. She's asking Alexandre about the Riyadh competition.
Yeah.
It was a project that aimed avoiding excessive sunlight. However, what kind of twist to the project would you suggest when talking about countries in North and Central Europe? So basically, it's about the Riyadh project and how that could work in Germany or North Europe. A very good question.
Yes. I'd like to tell you something that I really mentioned earlier, that architecture is a testimony to its context. So whenever an architecture is located in a context, it needs to tell us a story that I belong to this context. This is how I react to the climate in this context. This is how I react to the topography of this context. So architecture needs to actually respond to where it is located. So if you want to compare KSA, which reaches 50 degrees Celsius during summer, so people cannot go outside. They're prohibited to go outside. They have to just stay indoors. So by creating this microclimate that was created in KSA using the greenery and the shading system, we sort of studied how the sun was actually moving, and the design actually was engendered following the movement of the sun. So in order to create a project in Northern Europe, which I spent many times, I just came back from Europe, and for instance, in Germany and in these areas like Amsterdam, in the Netherlands and Belgium, these are areas that don't really see much the sun. It's always clouded. That's what I realized when I was there. So we need to respond as an architect. We need to respond with our projects accordingly. For instance, we cannot use solar panels because they won't be efficient in an area that doesn't possess much light. But we can use much more technologies that works on UV, for example. But of course, we were just trying to avoid the sun exposure because it's powerful. But in Germany or in Berlin or in anywhere in Europe that has cold climate, we need to just think differently. We cannot actually spend time outside, and for the time being, you cannot spend time outside and get cold. But being protected from the sun is actually doable, and it's pragmatic and it's easy. But you cannot just you cannot just avoid being cold, because if the whole environment is being cold, you need to find a way to heat it. So I think that there might be a lot of ideas that can be actually altered, but of course, if you do a research on it, you can find some ways to actually create another microclimate in a cold area. Because I was able to successfully do it in a hot area, but to make it in a cold area, it's much more difficult. Because when you're working with the high temperatures, you can embed water and greeneries. They can help diminish and reduce temperature dramatically. And there are so many techniques that you can use using hydraulic water movement that can actually help reduce the temperature. But to increase the temperature is actually something completely different and needs another type of science. This is when we embed science in architecture. So, but to do it passively, like we did in KSA, we were able to fix this project passively by creating these cascading movies and creating shades. It's easier, you know. So you just simply create shades in a way that you can spend time outside. You're not exposed to the sun. You're safe. And there's a tree next to you, and there's a pond of water that is and there's a small machine that's going to help you cool up the space, so you can just sit outside in when temperature is 50, because when you're where you're sitting, the temperature is dropped down to maybe 30 and 35, which is acceptable in maybe 40 in KSA. But again, to increase the temperature is something else.
So thank you, Alexandre, and thank you, Maren, for the very good question.
I would also like to ask something.
Yes, please, Alessia.
Firstly, I'd like to thank Zein for all the wonderful projects. I really liked a lot of them. We went from objects that came as a form of necessity, such as the shelters, to stages that need glamour. Both had in common the modularity and multifunctional purposes. I wanted to ask, when taking into consideration designing for objects where we spend our daily life, such as schools, universities, or even residential buildings, would you suggest incorporating modularity, or does it just overcomplicate the design and the life of the user? Because we can do that in shared spaces, but when it comes to personal, individual spaces, how should we work with that?
That there's a certain, you know, circumstances that would lead the architecture where how it's supposed to be. So you're saying that if you want to design a residential, like a house or a private house or residential building using modularity, it depends on the program. For example, if we were asked once to create a dorms project or dormitory project in somewhere in Lebanon for students, but we were able to successfully create modular spaces. We used actually walls on wheels, so we were able to move these walls and then connect them to the tracks. So they just move from track to another. We were able to create this modular system to maybe sometimes you want a smaller room, sometimes you want a bigger room. So modularity can be used anywhere. So it all depends on the demand and on the need of the client. So if the client is requesting something modular, it's your job as an architect to contribute to this assignment and to create something modular. However, if you were asked to create a private house, I don't think that the modularity can actually mix with private houses, because in private house it's always it's how the client wants to live his life. It's how the client. It all relies on the client, how he wants his spaces to be, how he wants to live his life. Maybe the client will ask for a huge room with a huge wardrobe, with a huge bathroom, and maybe he wants maybe 2-story levels, maybe he wants one flat room. So it's actually subjectively, you don't have an answer for that. So it all depends on the client's demands. But you as an architect, you contribute to whatever the exercise asks you to do there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alessia. So any other comment or questions? No, so I think we can conclude here. Alexandre, thank you again for the fantastic presentation. I think what you presented was highly innovative and very original and new for the audience. I think as a final comment, I think one of my favorite architects is Oscar Niemeyer, and the reason I like him is because he was not only an architect, he was also an artist, but he also did projects for the poor, especially he built like schools that were replicated in the poor neighborhoods, in the favelas, that are fantastic. And if you look at those projects, you see how interesting an architecture can change really the society, can provide a better quality of life for everyone, for poor people and also for everyone. And it can even compete with luxury projects that are built in certain countries, but sometimes they lack the very essence of what is a good architecture. And I think you showed us some great examples of these interventions for poor people. And I think, and maybe this is like last final question to you, do you think there is more potential in developing countries like in global south, etc., where maybe there are less regulations, less strict regulations, less bureaucracies, more opportunities, growth, demographic growth, and problems? So in the case that you have a problem, then sometimes this crisis becomes, let's say, like engine for finding a solution. So do you think really that there is more potential in developing countries?
Yes.
So
I think best idea for this project, because there's always this fluctuation and disparities between countries. We have rich countries and we have developing countries and have developed countries. So the developed countries, they actually have the money to buy this project and to store them in their warehouses. So whenever the crisis happens, they can just install it immediately. But some poor countries that don't have they have the very low GDP, they don't have the ability to buy it. So I think there needs to be some sort of global inclusive platform that will accept donations. So this platform will be worldwide, and this platform will be extracting money from all over the world. So whenever any crisis happens anywhere in the world, like for example, right now the war in Ukraine, there are millions of refugees in Poland and in everywhere and around in Europe. So many where the rich ones they can just manage, but the ones that are poor, they don't have the ability to buy a new house. They are being homeless. So we need to target these kind of people in this platform. So whenever any crisis around the world happens, this just like the UN maybe comes up to the UN, we can just, instead of these people living in the UN tents, which they're not human, some people were dying from extreme cold because of these tents, using materials that are not really architecturally feasible or effective. So this platform will allow to, in case of any emergency or any disaster, to intervene actually, and to be there for the people. For example, when the explosion happened, we received many helps from all over the world. Like we received medication helps from outside, and they came from all over the world. We received food and help, and maybe donations and money. But I think we don't have to wait until the crisis or the disaster happened to start getting help. We need to set ourselves ready for the next disaster. We need to always be ready for any disaster by having this platform that I'm going to be working on in the future. We will have the money ready to use for emergencies. And we'll have this project stored, and whenever any crisis happens, you can just move this project there and build the whole city that got destroyed. Like for example, in Turkey, there were thousands of buildings that ripped off and were destroyed because of the earthquake. And we felt the earthquake here in Lebanon, and also in Syria. And in Ukraine. So these are ongoing events right now. So there are millions and millions of people that are in deep need for shelters that. They're not being offered shelters, they are being offered just UN tents. So that's why maybe this platform will intervene whenever this crisis happens, and we start building communities using this project. So when the crisis is over, we can dismantle it and store it again until another crisis happens. So I think we will have the potential, but I think we need to act. We need to actually have we have to start, talking about the project and maybe start expanding the project from all over the world, so we can have this sort of international platform that will just tailor for this emergency relief architecture.
Okay, Alexandre. Okay, so last question, really, I couldn't keep it, is about you know, there was an Egyptian architect who wrote a book and actually did projects for the poor. If I'm not wrong, Hassan Fatih. So who did projects for the poor, and they call it architecture for the poor. And actually, the principles of those projects were based on tradition. And if we search in history of architecture, we see a certain repetition of old ideas that come into light again and again. So I'm just thinking of your projects in Riyadh and elsewhere, and you see a certain coming back to what is Mashrabiyya and what are, let's say, tools that we know since the beginning of history of architecture, and they get repeated. So is it like a destiny of architecture to be like a cycle or something like that? That there are really, of course, there is technological innovations, but as to composition and form and light and shading and all those things, it's like more like universal in the essence. So do you have this feeling, like, or it's just my impression? Thank you.
I think that if you talk about, when I talk about sort of vernacular architecture, until this day, we still extract many ideas that, because humans of ancient time used to actually used to find the places where they have resources. So humans of ancient times used to build their homes using ways and techniques that predates our concept of technology and science today. So, and they were able to make it. For example, the troglodytic, they used to use the caves and the underground, so they were able to create a microclimate in temperatures, the really high temperatures. They were able to create to decrease the temperature 20 degrees just by entering the cave or by just digging underground, the troglodytes. And same for the igloo in the North Poles, where they actually started building these igloos to actually create a safe place where this sort of dome, it creates a microclimate and it actually pressures the temperature to not change or not decrease or increase. So this is what the Eskimo did, and so on. So they were able to come up with really interesting techniques, actually increase and decrease temperatures or to create their own microclimate and to protect themselves from the intense sun rays, or to protect themselves from the rain and from storms. So this is how humans evolve. So there's a sort of all this sort of Darwin evolution idea that humans sort of evolved, you know, by adapting to nature. They were adapting to natures by, for example, there's a river in here. They just sit down next to the river and they just sit under the tree, and they build here because the tree will protect them from the sun and will protect them from the rain. So they used to adapt to nature. But right now, we are adapting nature to our life. So it's different. So now we have the technology. Now we have imagine that they used to do these techniques. Even the pyramids, they used to create with the water, the microclimate. So imagine right now with all the technology and advancements that we've reached, and we're still not ready for any disaster, and we're still using active energy consumptions like the air conditioning, and we're consuming a lot of energy, and we're harming the environment, and we're emitting carbon. And now they're paying the price, and they're trying to decrease the carbon emissions to net zero, but that's impossible because that's going to need a lot of time, and it's going to need a radical change. Otherwise, we're going to be doomed. So many countries are actually doing it. They're actually turning into the cars into EV, and they're working on. There's a lot of architecture also emit for 40% of the total carbon emission, and the global greenhouse gas emission will increase 30% in the 2050 if we don't actually take action to try to neutralize the carbon emission. So the idea of the ancient techniques they used to use in architecture, it can be actually maybe the starting point or the driving force that will actually inspire us. That yes, they used to live in a very natural, good way. Now we're using a lot of technologies that is harmful. Maybe we can just step back a little bit and maybe get rid of this bad technology that is harming nature, and maybe use more new technologies that are more environmentally friendly or more pretty much similar or alike to the old technique ones. So we need to be inspired by the ancient techniques. And maybe we can redesign the ancient techniques in new ways and new technologies. This is how I see things. If we redesign this vernacular architecture, if we redesign them for today, by inspiring and taking the good stuff from it and doing it in a way that resembles our period of our time, maybe we can reach. Maybe one step further to reduce and diminish carbon emission and to be more friendly with our environment. That's what I said, that we all in like this project, this Star Architect, this project, but these projects are killing our environment. So I see that the future of architecture needs to lead to more like I was talking about the white dot. Each architect needs to lead the project into a more carbon-free project, even if we were obliged to use concrete. Like for example, in the white dot, we were obliged to use concrete. We were able to neutralize the carbon by just changing the rebars, replacing the steel by basalt, which is basalt environmentally friendly, and by embedding this micro, which is coming from nature, the microalgae. It nurtures using by absorbing carbon. So we can build more microalgae in cities so they can absorb carbon. There are many techniques and I think the answers lies in nature. Everything we need to find, we can find it in nature. I mean, that's
thank you so much, Alexandre. It was really a fantastic presentation, and now we can stop the recording, Irma, and maybe just close it. And thank you so much again on behalf of Metropolitan Tirana.